Hello and welcome to another installation video. I was intending to do a game mod this time round, but I think it would be interesting to do a installation, or I should say a video creation video for those people that want to learn the basics of an editing program like Adobe Premiere Pro. And I remember when I first got it, not that I'm an advanced user by any stretch, but when I first got it, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I suspect that a vast majority of what it can offer to do, I'm not even aware of yet. But for the basics of just creating a simple YouTube video like the ones I tend to do, I thought it would be interesting to just go over some of the basics. People can hopefully learn something from that, and also advise me if I'm doing something wrong. So that's what I thought I'd do for this week's non-gaming related video. So first thing I tend to do is just to start a new project, and I'm going to call this one, let's call it, it doesn't really matter because the video I'm actually going to edit is what I've already uploaded. It will be the footage that was in the third Quake video, which I think was called the Necropolis. So I won't go through the whole video because it's already up for those to look at, but this is more about how to apply transitions, color correction, a little bit of audio, that sort of thing, and just the basics, just so you can get to grips with actually using the editor, so it's not completely alien to you. So back to the name, let's just call it Q3, that'll do. I use the CUDA acceleration there rather than just the software only. I think the software only will require your CPU to do much more of the work. But I tend to use that because I'm running an Nvidia card at the moment, which actually brings me on to another brief topic, is that for those of you that do use Adobe Premiere Pro who have Nvidia GPUs, you may have noticed, as I have, from around about, I don't know, halfway through last year, that performance when running playback, or generally playback anything, and especially when you're applying transitions, some of the playback is really choppy, and it's got progressively worse. It's not so bad that I can't make a video. It's certainly not as intense as that, not as unreliable as that, but it does make me, it's a very regular annoyance, but it's a very mild annoyance. But because I use Premiere Pro almost on a daily basis, I am considering getting rid of my Nvidia card and going for an AMD one, because when I tested my 7970 before, just to make sure it worked before selling it, it was much smoother under OpenCL. It was like 99% better. So as I say, it's a minor annoyance, but it's very regular because I use it every day virtually. So I'm not sure. Unfortunately, if I do that, I'll end up losing the functionality of G-Sync, which would be a shame, and that means then changing the monitor if I want to get FreeSync. And that's the one thing that I expect many people hate about this monitor syncing technology, is that it does lock you into one vendor, which is the last thing I want to do. But anyway. So yeah, I choose the CUDA. To be honest, here the video and the audio and the capture, I don't even really know. Is it the just your timelines in seconds rather than frames? I imagine that to be the case. The audio, I've never tried the milliseconds. I don't even know what the difference would be. And the capture, again, I don't actually know. I'm assuming HDV is better than DV. I don't know. As I say, this is not an advanced tutorial. It's purely how I go about making a simple YouTube video. They're slightly more intensive than they were from day one, but they're still very basic compared to a lot of the advanced creators out there. Very basic, in fact. Right, so I'm calling it Q3, and then I just press OK. And we come up to the main workspace. And you can just left click once there, move it up and down just to create a bigger workspace. But we'll get to that later. The first thing I want to do is to add some footage. So I click on Project on the left there. And you can either drop and drag the footage in, or you can go to File and Import. And I used to do that, but I just tend to drag and drop now. It seems to be, you know, just as good, for want of another word. So I'm just going to click on my E drive here, go to desktop, and I've got some files to choose from. Most of these are videos that haven't been edited yet. It's just raw footage. These are mainly future Quake videos, because naturally I'm much further ahead than what you get to watch. But this is the one we want for this video, so I'm just going to drag and drop it in and just wait for it to what's the word? It says conforming there, so I'm assuming that's the right way of looking at it. It is currently conforming. Not always a good thing to do, conform, but there we are. I digress. Okay, so it's almost finished. Right, bingo. So the first thing I do is I just take the footage and I just drop it in. Again, drag and drop, and as you can see, it's in the timeline now. And in this instance, I know that a fair chunk of this particular video is allocated towards the next level, which is the most recent one I've uploaded at the time of this video anyway, part 4. And if I just skip through, where is it? I think that's the beginning of it. Oh yes, there it is. So I'm just going to locate exactly where that is, and what I tend to do is I'll just skip forward until I get to the exact frame where the next level starts. I suppose actually I can just cut back slightly just before the loading sign comes up. It doesn't always pay to be pedantic, but that's the way my mind works. So I'm going to hit this razor tool here, click it once, left click it once, and then I'm just going to find the exact line that I want, and you'll find that it will kind of almost snap into place. It's not, I'll just turn the mouse sensitivity down slightly because it helps when editing. And I click left once, and if I move the actual position of the video, you can see there's a line there. This bit here, I'm just going to right click on it, and it automatically selects all three files. The top one's the video track, and the bottom two are audio tracks. The top one of the two bottom audio tracks is me speaking, and the one below it is the game audio. So I just then go clear, and I've now got roughly, at the moment anyway, about 31 minutes or so to work with. It's not going to be edited exactly like the one that I've uploaded already, because I'm not going to upload it. I'm just going to use it for demonstration purposes. But I'll go back, say, to the beginning, and then I will next find, say, where did it begin? So it's very close to there. And once again, just select the razor tool. If you need to expand this timeline and kind of, in a sense, zoom in so that you can be more precise, you can just reduce this, just holding it with my left mouse button and dragging it to the left. And as you can see, the timeline becomes I can't think of the word, but it's the time condenses down. So it says there 30 seconds and there's 45, and eventually if I went far enough to the left, there's 35 seconds, there's 36 seconds, 37. So as you can see, you can really shave off in the end frames if you want to, but we don't need that just here. So I can zoom back out a little bit and know that this is a perfectly good place to cut. And then clear once again, right click and clear. And then I'm just gonna, I may for this video, not that I do for this Quake series, I may add a an introductory 5 or 10 second video thumbnail, if you like, which my Turok 2 videos have, and show you how to do a slow zoom on that. So I'll just move, again, just holding left click once and just drag to roughly 15 seconds. It gives me a bit of free room to do something in there later on. So we now got about 31 minutes, and what I'm going to do is a series of simply just watching through the video and then cutting at various points where I think it's, you know, rubbish footage or none of my stuff scripted, so I often stumble over words or come out with crap, so I can just you know, chuck that away. First thing I want to show you though is, not that I tend to do it much these days because I think it's probably unnecessary for a large majority of the time, but you can change the lighting and the contrast and so on, and as you probably know, when you record something and upload it, it can look darker than what it is, you know, than what you saw, what you saw when you were recording. So you just go to effects here, and you want to go to video effects. Now, I think there's more than one way to achieve this, but what I do these days is I go to, if I can remember, is it blur and sharpen? No, it is not. It is color correction, and then it's brightness and contrast. So you could just drag, left click once, just drag the icon onto this video time sequence, and if you look there, that little sort of symbol there, that FX symbol, that was white I think, or grey. It's now pink. So in the effects controls on the left hand side, up comes a series of settings, and it looks quite intimidating, but there really is no need to be. All we're trying to do here is increase the brightness. So find the brightness, FX brightness and contrast. That's the only thing we're interested in. Look at the brightness, and I'm just going to left click once on the value, which is currently set to 0. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you wanted to make it much brighter. Not that I would, because it would look so washed out, but in my Deus Ex revision playthrough, that is, for some reason, the modders have elected to make it very, very, very dark. So I always increase the brightness by 10%. So let's just do that here and just take a look at how awful it will look. And as you can see, it actually doesn't look quite as bad as I thought it would. Let's just drag this down a bit, left click and just pull the mouse down. But it's, for me, it's a bit too washed out compared to you know, what I would like. But there you've increased the brightness by 10%. And what I also tend to do with the Deus Ex footage is just touch up the contrast slightly to limit the washing out effect of the increased brightness. And I tend to make that 1%. And in here the difference is going to be so minimal because there's not much of a problem with the brightness to begin with. So in this instance I'm not going to make this any brighter, but that just shows you how you can do it. I think before they updated Premiere Pro some time ago, I think it was called color correction. Sorry, it's still called color correction, but I think you found it in a different place in the settings. I can't. It was under obsolete. Fast color corrector. That was it. That's what I used to use. Now I don't know if what I've got here is the wrong thing to use, but as you can see, it does work. It does make it brighter, and no one said to me, you're doing something wrong, or it looks really dark, or really, or too washed out. So I'm happy to carry on with that for the meantime. So just to close this sort of address down, you can just left click once there, and the same here. And because I'm happy with the actual the brightness and contrast, I'm just going to turn that down to 0 again. This will look slightly darker before I adjust the contrast, because that's currently at 1. That is how you do the sort of brightness and contrast. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to play the video, and I'll edit out bits so you don't have to watch loads. I'll just find the key parts where I'm going to make cut some footage out, splice some together, whatever, and then I'll pause the video at those points. Now this is where I've got to so far. I'm just going to show you what I mean about the playback performance of Premiere Pro, which I believe is either somehow Nvidia related. I'm not saying it's Nvidia's fault or anyone's fault, in fact, but it has got, the performance has got worse over time, noticeably, and I have had a couple of instances where I've almost been unable to make a video. So what I'm going to do is, it might not work now I want it to, but I'm just going to play a sequence and try and get it to stutter and skip, which is kind of unfair really on it, but let's see if it does it. It'll probably run smooth when I press play, but it will probably go choppy again once I find a new place to stop and start again. Right, there we are. Those scrags do like to ambush you. And as you can see, that was extremely choppy performance, and most of the time the playback when just pressing play is fine, but it always does that at some point when I'm editing a video, and it's even worse when I try and apply transitions, which I will I'll briefly look at later on. But that was just to show you what I meant by performance. It was nowhere near as bad as that when I first started using it. And here's another example of this is a very minor sort of negative point, but associated with the playback, the choppiness. Sometimes when you, let's say you want to jump from one place to another, you'll click where you want to go, and there can be quite a delay, waiting for it to catch up. That's not too bad what you saw there, but I've known it be more pronounced than that. But that's a very minor nitpick. If that's the only problem that you'd had when you go to edit a video, then it's a non-event really. Just thought I'd throw that in there. Okay, so let's say I want to make a cut at this point in the video. I didn't actually do one here for the main video. It doesn't really matter, where I cut and splice things. It's just an example. So we want to click on our razor tool, and in this video I'm not going to go through any of the other icons there, and to be honest with you, there's a few of them that I can't even remember what they do. I do use the what's that one called, the track select forward sometimes. Ripple edit can be useful, but I think the hand tool, I hardly ever use that. So yes, back to the razor tool. That's the tool you're going to use a lot. So we want to cut here, and again, if you want to be a bit more precise, have a bit more control, you can just drag that in, and I'm just going to click there because that's where I want to make the incision, if you like. And then let's say I want to cut, let's just play it forward a little bit. Right, so I've got the silver key. You can see it stuttering there. So this will do. Actually, I'll wait until I finish talking in the video, then I'll cut afterwards. That'll do. So I've got the quad damage there. Not that I would want to cut there, but I will for this particular demonstration purpose. And I'm then going to cut there. So right click on the segment that you've cut, and it should appear all highlighted, and it gives you a whole range of options that you can do. We just want to get rid of it. Clear. So now you've got this blank, and unless you push these together, then all you'll see is this. Okay, so you don't want that in any video unless it's for a specific reason. So I go back to the selection tool. I have to remember what it was called then, and then I just want to right click on this space here and click with the left mouse button ripple delete, and that brings it together. So not that it'll make any sense, but it'll now play like it should do. There you go, and you can see the choppiness there. I mean, I hope you can anyway. And this is why you're dealing with that all the time. So it's I don't know whether it's Adobe is coding this further away from Nvidia, or whether it's the other way around, or whether it's something to do with an Nvidia driver. I don't know. I suspect if I reverted to a very, very old Nvidia driver, like a year ago or more, it might run 80-90% better, but then that has other drawbacks for games that we're playing now, so it's not really a magic bullet solution for it. So we've got this bit of footage here. We want to now create a transition, so let's left click on the video effects, which brings it back up there. So we've now got the back to the original selection choices. I want video transitions, so I'm going to left click once here, and I'm going to left click once for the audio as well. The default video transition is called dissolve, which I like, but unfortunately this is again a problem now. Using dissolve, it stutters like buggery. So I have experimented in the past with gradient wipe, which seems to run fine, but the problem is you have to then render these transitions in before you finally render the whole project, which is not a big deal, but basically it means this default transition, you can't just drag and drop it in. Let's say I want to make that, don't know whether you can see there, but I've just placed it on the video, the crack in the video. That makes sense. I'm just going to close this down so you can see that video transition much more clearly. I'm just going to double click on it, which means to set the transition duration. It's currently at about 1/4 second, which is, I use that sometimes, but I tend to go for 1/2 second these days for a video transition, sometimes as much as 2 seconds. So let's press OK to increase the duration, and as you can see, that bar has got longer. Now it probably won't do what I want it to now while I'm recording, but what can happen is it will really stutter when playing back through the transition, and for this purpose I hope it does do that, whereas normally I that's the last thing I want. There you go, and you didn't even see a transition there because it was just so stuttery. Sometimes if you then put the pointer back there and then play, then it resumes okay sometimes, but not always. Nope, still bad. Sometimes you find that if you leave it at the default duration length of 1/4 second, it might run better, but it seems the longer you make it, 1/2 second, 1 second, 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds, not that you'd need a transition that long in this instance. Well, there's no reason why you couldn't have one, but it will run even worse. So to combat that, what I've been doing some of the time, as I say, is to use an alternate transition, and one that I'm using quite a bit at the moment, you may have noticed, is clock wipe. So I just left click again, drag it onto the timeline, but this time look at the yellow line above it, it goes red, which means it will still be really, really choppy, but it does give me the option now of rendering that transition into the project. And so I make sure that's highlighted. I just left click on it once so it's in white, and then I go up to sequence and I just go to render selection, and this will vary in time length depending on your machine. You're probably looking at about, I don't know, half a minute or something, so it's not very long, but you should be able to see where I'm coming from. Before it was much quicker just to drop in the cross dissolve and it work, but it doesn't now. So render selection, I'll click that, and as you can see it's quite a slow process, although in the grand scheme of things it's not very long to wait really. But I do think the actual rendering time it takes longer now than it used to. So I don't know what the deal is there, but I'll cut the video and come back to when it's nearly finished rendering. Okay, that's done. So you can now see that the line above is green, which basically means, you know, you're good to go. So if I press it now, it should run nearly perfect or perfect. Nevertheless, the playback after the transition still runs terribly, but you can see what I mean. The transition ran beautifully there. I'll just try it once more. Sometimes when you click on a different position with the selection tool, it pays to wait a second or two, and that tends to help performance a little bit. There you go. So that's how I do a video transition. You can also, if I clear that, you can also right click, put your pointer on here, and it will just ignore the red arrow symbol, but I just right click on it, and then you can apply the default transitions to each of these tracks. And the default transitions are currently as when I started using Premiere Pro, which is cross dissolve for the video. Let's just apply them, and constant power for the audio. This brings me on to the audio transition. So we've got a choice of 3 here under the crossfade in audio transition, and the default is the constant power, like I just mentioned. I don't really need it on the microphone track there because I'm not saying anything, and the game audio is going to cover just about any, the most minor of blips on the microphone track there. And so what I'll do is, I think I'll just cancel the video one to make the playback better, and this is what the audio sounds like now with a transition. So just before you get to this point, you should start to hear the noise of this little bit of segment appearing in the actual changeover, and you can adjust the duration. Let's say you made it, for example, not that I would, but let's say you made it 10 seconds. Okay, that's a very large audio transition, but you'll start to hear sound from this side into that side before you want to. But just to show you what I mean, let's play it. Watch. Now I don't know if that's actually very clear through, for you at home, but I could hear quite clearly there was some noises that were kind of wishy-washying into each other, which just doesn't sound right. So normally for an audio transition, I think the actual default length is, another pointer here is that you can just move this closer together so that you can click on that more easily without doing something unwanted. It's 1 second is the standard duration for an audio transition, and I rarely go above 2, and I rarely go below 1. So that's how you would place a constant power transition. If I was doing the beginning of the video, you may notice that I fade my audio in and I fade it out. This is called I'll just block the I'll mute. That's it. If you press the mute track here, I can block the microphone coming in. I didn't actually need to do the padlock thing there. I just suddenly remembered that you can press mute for the the actual relevant track you want. So exponential fade is one of my favourite transitions. All you need to do is just left click and drag it in, and you should see a little block appear there with the word, or the beginning of the word, exponential on it. So it's currently set to 1 second, as I think all the audio transition durations are. So let's say you wanted the game sound to fade in nice and slow. Let's say you made it 7 seconds, which is probably too long for this one, but it would sound something like this. There we go, you see? So that can be a nice touch, and I tend to apply that at the beginning and at the end of each video. Rarely do I use it in the middle of the video, anywhere in the sequence. And you can also do that for the microphone track, or like you may have noticed that in my Quake Epsilon playthrough at the moment, I'm playing, where relevant, I'm playing the Doom 64 music files for it. So I shall go about showing you how I do that in a moment, but I drag the file to match the start of the whole series of files here, tracks, and I have the exponential fade set to the same length usually on them, so it's all nice and clean and crisp, and it all enters at the same time. The video I use, there's additive dissolve, which I've recently started using. I'm not actually sure really what the benefit is of using that over cross dissolve. I just find cross dissolve works for the beginning of the video as well. Let's get rid of that audio transition. So here I've got, in the video sequence, I've got the cross dissolve, and this is where I want the video to fade in. You start off black and it comes in, and gradually you see a picture. So let's make it again 10 seconds, which is more than I usually do. Mine tends to be between 2.5 and I don't know, 5 seconds or something. So let's start about here. And as you can see, it gradually gets brighter. It's not quite there yet. There's still about 3 or 4 seconds left, but... And there we go, you see. That now brings it up to full brightness, according to what you set in the... if I left click on that FX pink square, our brightness and contrast are currently not changed, but as I showed you before, once you come out of that transition, you will be in accordance with the values here. So if you've made it exceptionally bright, like 50%, it will look something like this. Not very nice to look at, but you get my point. So let's put that back to 0. That's the way I like it. Right, so that shows you how to do like a fade in and an audio fade in. And I've shown you how to do a bit in the center here, like where you want to cut away a chunk of information. I've shown you how to use the clock wipe, or you can use a gradient wipe, which is what I've used before. That works the same way as the clock wipe does. I would just left click and drag. There's probably another way to install the transition, but that's the way I do it. And with a gradient wipe you get a little bit more to do to get it to work, not much. I just tend to go for softness, I go to 0. That's just a personal preference, there's not a right or wrong there. I click OK, and I'll have to shrink this so we can see something. Move it along a bit. There we go. And as you can see, in fact it turns out I didn't actually drop in the gradient wipe quite correctly. Let's try again. go, that's better. 0 for softness. And as you can see, there's that little bit of red. And I'm going to have this gradient wipe. Make it 2 seconds. So it's quite a long transition. It's lit up white, which means it's selected. I'm going to go to sequence and render selection. Getting near the end of rendering now. It just shows you how long this takes. It's been a while. It's been probably a minute or two. Something like that. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit there. Time elapsed. Oh no, I wasn't far off. 2 minutes and 10 seconds. And there we can see the how the transition looks. So just let the video catch up with my adjustment and then play again. And just out of interest, just watch it really choppy once it carries on. And it can take a while before it settles down. It can be some time. It can be a long time, in fact. I don't know how well you can see this, but it looks like I'm playing at about 3 or 4 frames a second. Settling down a little bit now. Probably it's getting there. It's more like 15 frames or something now a second. But still not good though. Still not right. So that just shows you how long you could wait in theory for it to return to normal. And the best thing you can do is just press stop and then play again, and then it'll run hopefully fine. There's a fiend there in mid-attack. So I've never actually seen that before. It's come to say hello. Right, so that's how to do the transitions in the